First, I want to give all thanks and honor and glory to God for choosing Elmore and me to be Nolan's parents. We thank you, Lord, for the beautiful 18 years that you blessed us with him. Thank you for the joy he brought not only to our family, but also to his friends and everyone in the community whose lives he touched. Nolan had such a gentle, calming spirit about him. He had a way of making people feel seen, welcome, and valued. He could lift your confidence with just a few words and make you feel like you belonged. If you ever had the privilege of meeting our son Nolan or calling him a friend, then you experienced a glimpse of God's love through him. He was both protective and nurturing. He often told us that one day he wanted to have 3 daughters that he would name Sophia, Charlotte, and Olivia. He had a deep love for the Lord and an unwavering faith that was evident in the way he lived his life. As much as our hearts are broken, we find peace in knowing that our son is resting in the arms of the Lord. We will miss everything about him, from his quiet nature to the corny jokes, his gentle smile, the way he made everyone around him feel comfortable, loved, and at ease. Your absence has left an emptiness that can never truly be filled. A piece of our hearts will always be missing. Nolan, your father and I are incredibly proud of you. We've always been proud of you, of the young man you were, and we will always be proud of the legacy of love, kindness, and faith that you have left behind. In a world that can often feel dark, be like Nolan. Be the light that brightens the lives of those around you. Be the warmth for those who may be feeling the coldness of the world. Love deeply, protect fiercely, and welcome others with kindness. And remain faithful knowing that God is always with you. Lastly, I ask that each of you keep Nolan's memory alive. Hold him close in your hearts. Share his stories and never stop saying his name. As long as we continue to remember him, his light will continue to shine through us all. Nolan, we love you. We'll continue to fight for you. Yes. And until we meet again, and thank you all for coming. Thank you.
In a few hours, a mother will stand in a church and try to talk about who her son was instead of how he died. Before she does that, 3 separate threads in this case moved at once. A federal agency finally spoke on the record. A sitting judge confirmed, in her own words, that she has been personally threatened over this case. And the one witness this case needed to hear from most sat down, face to face, with Nolan's mother, for the first time in her own words. This is true crime evidence. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss stories like this one. 16 days after his body was recovered from the water off Horn Island, Nolan Wells is being laid to rest this morning in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. 3 updates, one morning. Let's go through all of it. The service is being held at Centerpoint Church, the same town where Nolan grew up, played football, and became the young man the rest of the country now only knows through headlines. Visitation runs from 9 to 11 this morning, with the service beginning immediately after. Reverend Al Sharpton is delivering the eulogy. Arrangements were handled through Lockett Williams Mortuary in Gulfport. Filmmaker Tyler Perry covered the full cost of the service. Colin Kaepernick funded the independent autopsy the family requested, and media mogul Byron Allen contributed a significant donation toward a fund established in Nolan's name, joined by other public figures once this story reached a national audience. The service, according to updated reporting, has been opened to media, a shift from earlier discussion of keeping it closed, which means more people will witness this morning directly rather than only through a screen. Afterward, the family is holding what Christine has described not as a traditional repast, but as a gathering built specifically around celebrating who her son actually was. One of the only things she's been able to hold on to in a situation where almost nothing else is felt within her control. And this morning, that grief arrives carrying two new pieces of information this case didn't have even a few days ago. Let's start with the FBI. For most of this case, one question followed it everywhere. Why was a federal agency involved at all in what was, on paper, a local Mississippi death investigation? The answer had only ever arrived in fragments, a passing mention here, an unconfirmed detail there, no full statement from the Bureau itself. That kind of silence does something to a case already this public. It doesn't stay empty. People fill it with theories, because uncertainty is often heavier to carry than a difficult truth. And for a family already exhausted from fighting for basic answers, an unexplained federal presence adds an entirely separate layer of worry. Is this bigger than we've been told? Is something being kept from us? That changed this week. The FBI's Jackson Field office released a complete, on-the-record statement addressing its role directly for the first time since this case began. It leaves no room for confusion on the central point. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office is leading this investigation and will continue to lead it from start to finish. The FBI describes its own role as support, federal tools made available, federal partnerships drawn on when needed, not a takeover, offered specifically because Jackson County requested it, built on what the Bureau calls years of working alongside local law enforcement on complex cases like this one. Federal agencies rarely explain themselves publicly while an investigation is active. The fact that this one did, in writing, on the record, suggests they understood exactly how much damage an unanswered question was doing to a family already struggling to hold onto any sense of certainty. Inside that same statement is the detail that actually explains why federal agents are involved at all, and it has nothing to do with how Nolan died. The FBI says its efforts have been focused specifically on interstate threats received by people connected to this case, serious enough and crossing enough state lines to become a federal matter in their own right, entirely separate from the question of what happened to Nolan on that island. This isn't speculation. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole has publicly confirmed, in her own words, that she has received threats connected to this case. Let me stop right there, because that's worth sitting with directly. A sitting judge, a mother whose only connection to this case is that someone she loves was there that day, has found herself the target of threats serious enough to draw the federal government's attention. That's not a footnote. That's a second family pulled into the wreckage of a tragedy that was never theirs to carry. We're not going to repeat what was said to her. That serves no purpose here, and it would only cause more harm to a family already living under enough pressure. What matters, and what's now officially confirmed, is that those threats happened, that they were serious enough to draw federal attention, and that agents are actively working to trace where they came from. So here's where this case officially stands this morning, confirmed in writing by the agency itself. Federal agents are not investigating how Nolan Wells died. That remains entirely in Jackson County's hands. What federal agents are investigating is who is threatening the people now connected to his story, and that investigation is already underway, quietly, in the background of everything else unfolding here. This didn't arrive in isolation. It came days after Nolan's parents met directly with Jackson County District Attorney Angel Mears-Mrath alongside Attorney Ben Crump, who confirmed afterward that this investigation's findings, whenever it concludes, will go to a grand jury, and that Nolan's phone will undergo a coordinated review, the family's own investigators examining it alongside law enforcement's separate findings. Sheriff John Ledbetter has said plainly the Wells family deserves a thorough, factual investigation, and that his office intends to deliver exactly that. Taken together, this is a case now moving on multiple fronts at once, a sheriff's department running the core investigation, a DA's office coordinating toward a grand jury, a family's independent team working in parallel, two separate autopsies, and now a federal statement clarifying exactly where the FBI actually fits into all of it. Now, the second silence that broke this week. Her name is Katie. She was never actually a mystery in this case, not in the way the internet often treated her. Her identity surfaced early. Her own mother, Gracie McCormick, confirmed on Facebook that her daughter had spent time with Nolan on Horn Island that day and had already reached out to his family directly. Katie was never hiding. What was missing for nearly 2 full weeks was her own voice. Think about what that means for a young woman who did nothing wrong, who simply spent an afternoon talking to someone on a beach, and then found her name attached to one of the most talked about deaths in the country. Everything the world thought it knew about what Katie said came from someone else's account of it. First through a family friend relaying her version secondhand, then through her own mother's Facebook posts, not revealing anything new but correcting rumors that had already spun far beyond anything Katie herself had claimed. Every version of her account passed through someone else's memory and wording before it ever reached the one person who needed to hear it most. That changed this week. According to Christine, she and Katie finally sat down together, face to face. Not a phone call summarized by a third party. Not another post filtered through relatives. And according to Christine, what Katie told her in her own words did not match the story she'd been hearing from everyone else. Here's what Katie has maintained consistently from the start. She and Nolan spent time together on the island that day, and at some point they parted ways. Katie got back on a boat with her own friends, separate from Nolan's group. Based on what he told her before they separated, she believed he intended to rejoin his own friends and head back with them. But here's the detail that's been lost in almost every argument about this case online. Katie never actually saw Nolan get on that boat. She assumed it, based on a real conversation, based on what he told her directly in their last moments together. She did not personally witness him rejoining his friends afterward. That distinction matters more than almost anything else in this case right now. This isn't two witnesses staring at the same moment and describing two opposite things. Katie isn't claiming she watched Nolan walk away and step onto that boat. She's saying he told her his plan, and in that moment she had no reason to doubt it. An assumption built on a real conversation, not an eyewitness account of what happened after. And that leaves a real, unresolved gap. The space between the moment Nolan told Katie his intention and whatever actually happened once she walked away toward her own friends. Nobody has been able to fill it. Not Katie. Not his friends, who've offered their own account of what he told them. Not his family. Not investigators still working through digital evidence and witness statements. For 2 weeks, this contradiction was treated publicly as a simple standoff. One side says he stayed. The other says he planned to leave. But Katie's own account, finally delivered directly, is far more careful than either extreme. It isn't a flat denial of what his friends have said. It's an honest, specific acknowledgement of the limits of what she actually witnessed. That's precisely why this moment carries the weight it does. Not because Katie revealed something shocking or offered some final answer, but because for the first time since Nolan disappeared, his mother heard the truth directly from the one person outside his friend group who spoke with him last, without a relative's memory reshaping it. Without 2 weeks of internet speculation standing between them. It would have been easier for Katie to stay quiet and let someone else's version stand. Instead, she chose to sit across from a woman burying her son and answer questions in person. That choice doesn't undo whatever happened after she and Nolan parted ways, but it says something about who she is at a moment when silence would have been the easier path. This kind of confusion has followed this case from nearly the beginning, and it's worth remembering why context matters so much. Last week, a photo showing Nolan at a pool party circulated as proof he'd been alive after July 4th. It was confirmed, through image metadata and an account from his friend Tristan Shepard, that the photo was actually taken a full week earlier, on June 27th, before Nolan ever set foot on Horn Island. Around the same time, a separate video many believe showed Nolan in a confrontation shortly before he disappeared turned out to feature a different voice entirely. Shepard confirmed directly and repeatedly that the voice on that recording was his own, not Nolan's. Both corrections point to the same underlying pattern that's defined this case since day one. In the space created by 2 still pending autopsies, unverified claims have consistently moved faster than confirmed facts. These 2 threads, the FBI's statement and Katie's account, are more connected than they first appear. The same week Katie chose to speak directly, Judge Cole confirmed in her own name that she's living under active threats tied to this case. 2 very different people, in 2 very different positions, both facing real consequences simply for being connected to Nolan's story. Every person tied to this case is now weighing some version of the same question. What does it cost to come forward? What does it cost to tell the truth publicly in a case already this exposed? That's the weight Katie was carrying when she chose to sit down with Christine anyway. Not everyone views the grand jury referral itself as guaranteed progress. Former Mississippi Judge Carlos Moore has raised concerns publicly, pointing to what he describes as this district attorney's office handling a previous, unrelated case in a way that failed to produce an indictment despite what he calls overwhelming evidence. He said he intends to keep watching closely to make sure this case doesn't quietly stall the way he believes that one did. Other legal voices have offered a more measured read, noting a grand jury referral is often standard procedure for any death considered unnatural or suspicious, not proof on its own that foul play has been confirmed. Both perspectives are worth holding at once. Skepticism rooted in real history with a specific office isn't the same as assuming the worst without cause, and neither view cancels out the other. The real test won't be the referral itself. It'll be what a grand jury actually does with whatever this investigation produces. That brings us back to where this morning began. 2 weeks of a mother hearing one version of her son's final hours from strangers online, and an entirely different version from the friends who were with him that day. 2 weeks of not knowing which version, if either, was true. And then, finally, a conversation. Katie sitting across from Christine, face to face, no relative speaking on her behalf, telling Nolan's mother in her own words an account that didn't match what she'd been told by everyone else. Not a confession. Not a solution. An honest account from a young woman who spent 2 weeks carrying the weight of a story she never asked to become part of. That conversation doesn't close this case. It can't. It doesn't explain how Nolan ended up in the water off Horn Island, and it doesn't fill the gap between the moment he told Katie his plan and whatever happened in the hours after she walked away. That gap remains exactly what it's been for over 2 weeks, open, unresolved, unaccounted for by anyone. What it does is bring this family one step closer to the truth than they were even a week ago. Today, this family buries their 18-year-old son, still waiting on 2 autopsies, still waiting on a grand jury that hasn't convened, still without the full truth of what happened to him on that island, still living under the shadow of threats that have reached far beyond anything they imagined when they sent their son off for a 4th of July trip with friends. This case has tested nearly every relationship connected to it, all in the same short stretch of time. A federal agency forced to explain itself publicly, a young woman forced to become a central witness in a story she never chose, a family living under real protection from people who wish them harm, and a mother and father forced to bury their son under a level of scrutiny almost no grieving family has ever had to withstand. Somewhere inside that church this morning, a mother will stand in front of people who loved her son and try to talk about who he was rather than how he died. That's not closure. It's something smaller and, in its own way, something harder. It's a family choosing to make space for love in the middle of a story that has given them so little room to feel anything but grief. We will be here when there are real answers. Subscribe now, and stay with us through both autopsy results, through the grand jury, through whatever comes next.